Good afternoon, committee. Just we're waiting for a couple members to finish logging in, so we'll just be a moment. Good afternoon, committee members. This is the 13th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. Held virtually during the COVID-19 emergency, the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats of communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. For everyone's information, this is the 13th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. Mayor Holder is absent in other meetings today, and it is also Councillor Turner's virtual birthday party, so thank you for joining us. I am now looking to committee to see any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none from committee. I'll also note that to make sure that you have your agenda with addeds up, as there was an added presentation in today's package. So on consent items, we have 2.1 through to 2.4. Would any committee member like to pull any of those separate? Okay, perfect. Seeing none, I would need a mover. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Turner. And opening it for discussion to committee. Just the 8th report of the Cycling Advisory Committee, they'll have a report coming to us later within it. And it was routine parking and traffic bylaw things from Mr. McCrae. And I have my speakers list started if anyone would like to make comments on 2.1 through to 2.4. I will start my speakers list with Councillor Cassidy. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you stole my thunder. I was going to wish Councillor Turner a very happy 29th birthday today. I do want to comment on 2.3. I just want to say thank you to staff for continuing to do the rollout throughout the city of the lower speed limits in our neighborhoods. This is one tool in our possible toolbox that we can use to make our streets safer. You know, our neighborhoods are where children are walking to go to schools, to go to parks. People are walking their dogs. It's where they live and they play, and they deserve to live in as safe as possible neighborhoods in the City of London. So this is just one small thing that we can do. It is by no means the answer to the problems of cars, of drivers that are speeding throughout the City of London, but with engineering and education and enforcement, hopefully we'll start to see those the number of speeding drivers go down as people realize that this isn't acceptable, and we have to do all do our part to keep our streets safe. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anything else from committee members or visiting counselors, as we do have Councillor Lewis with us here today as well? Councillor Turner.
Just a quick question following up on Councillor Cassidy's comments on the speed limits. Perhaps we don't have an answer for this, but do we have any update on when the LTC is coming back with their information about the impacts of lowered speed limits on their routes?
Thank you for that. And I'll put that one to staff and also make committee aware that our deferred matters list in today's package has updated timelines as well, as committee had requested that, to assist staff for a response for Councillor Turner's LTC question.
Madam Chair, I don't actually have that answer off the top of my head. Mr. McGuire may though, so I'm just going to check in with him. And otherwise we can certainly check in with LTC and find out what their schedule is and provide that information to the council and committee.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Councillor Turner, do you have an alternate question while they track down, hopefully, that answer for you?
Okay, that's helpful. I recognize we're doing section by section anyway, so it may not have an immediate impact eventually once we get that answer. But I think it's important because it is key to our ability to implement this policy, and it's been a significant amount of time. So I'm a little confused as to why it's taking quite this long. And that's not a reflection on our staff. I think it's more still we're waiting for something from the LTC.
Perfect. And staff can chime in when they have an answer for that. But in the meantime, I believe I saw Councillor Helmer's hand.
Through the chair.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Ms. McGuire.
We do have a tentative date for reporting back, and that would be in February of next year. That looks a promising date.
Councillor Turner, follow-up to that, or?
I appreciate that. That's helpful. That's not the best answer. It's the right answer, but it's not the answer I was hoping for. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Helmer next, and then Councillor Cassidy.
Yes, I just wanted to share a perspective as a transit commissioner. As colleagues will be very familiar, we did have this thing called the pandemic, which has disrupted London Transit in a way that is frankly unprecedented. Other than the strike that totally shut down transit service, it's been very difficult for transit staff. And it has also impacted what's happening out on the roads, the kind of traffic that's going on, the on-time performance of vehicles, service that's provided. And I believe part of the delay is because LTC wants to do the analysis with real world conditions in normal operating circumstances. And we have not had normal operating circumstances for quite a long time. So I'm glad to hear that the February date is the target. I share Councillor Turner's desire to get the analysis that we need so we can make a decision about the speed limits, because I just see the LTC piece, speaking now as a councillor, as part of the decision-making process for us around speed limits, but not something that has to necessarily hold up the whole thing. That's unfortunately the direction that we passed, was we wanted to hear from them and get their input. And then we had the pandemic, and it has resulted in significant delays. So I just wanted to provide that potential piece of context, because it's not as though it's not seen as important or something that needs to be done, but that it's happening in an organization that's been very severely impacted.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Cassidy, and then I'll recognize Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add on to that, well, brought up by Councillors Turner and Councillor Helmer. Yeah, I'm happy to see this roll out. As I said, I'm happy to see the neighborhoods get their lower speed limits. It is the #1 issue, even during the pandemic, that I am contacted about. My constituents contact me asking for ways to slow people down, ways to stop the speeding. And then once we started to do the rollout, I was getting emails, when is my street going to get the lower speed limit signs? And while, you know, the motion did pass at council to hold off on the neighborhood connector streets, it has created breaks in neighborhoods. So rather than a whole neighborhood seeing the lower speed limit, which was our original intention, this decision to hold off to wait and hear back from the LTC has caused these divides in neighborhoods where some of the streets have the lower speed limits, but the major street through that usually cuts through a subdivision is one that has not seen its speed limit lowered. And I will tell you that generally that is where the worst of the speeding occurs. And so now I'm getting calls and emails from constituents that have the lower speed limits on their neighborhood streets, and they're asking when will the major street like Sunnyside Drive or Hastings Drive or Glenora Drive, when will we see those speed limits lowered? And these are walking routes to schools. There are pedestrian crossovers so that kids can get across these busier streets and to their schools safely. And this is where there are fewer stop signs, a lot of winding curves, blind curves, and these are the streets that we really need to do our best to make them safer. So I'm glad that Councillor Helmer is on this committee. I'm glad Councillor Helmer is a commissioner on the LTC, and I hope that Councillor Helmer, notwithstanding the pandemic, will push the LTC staff to get on board with trying to have our neighborhood streets as safe as possible. And a participant in that is every driver, including the driver of a bus. And lower speed limits is one way to make those streets safer.
Thank you. I see a nod from Councillor Helmer. I will now acknowledge our guest today of Councillor Lewis. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't take up too much of your time. I too am looking forward to the rollouts coming to my ward. I want to thank staff for the good conversations that we've had, particularly in terms of their reaching out to the LTC, where Route 35 is impacting our ability to lower the speed limits. And while that's not on today's list, I know that that is one that we can anticipate seeing in the next phase or two phases from now in terms of rolling out, because I know discussions have happened there. And similar to Councillor Cassidy, what that's created is a break in the neighborhood, particularly where we have two schools very close together, but then we have areas of 50 leading into them. And you see people hitting the gas as soon as they pass the 50 to speed up. So I just wanted to comment that I also continue to look forward to seeing the rollout. I think Councillor Cassidy's final point there, that includes the drivers of the buses, is a good one. I will say I am hearing increased concerns about perceived, because we know that somebody standing on the road's perception of speed is not necessarily the actual speed, but the speed of some of our LTC operators and traveling through some areas. So that's a concern as well. But I think we all have to keep in mind that this is still going to require some education, and it's also going to require some enforcement. We had one of the display boards up, one of the speed display boards up in one of my school zones just 2 weeks ago. And keep in mind that this is a 40 zone. And as I was on the sidewalk, I was seeing vehicles traveling at 57, 58, 62. So I hope that in addition to this, we're also going to continue to see some investment in enforcement, and in particular the automated speed cameras in our school zones, because I agree with Councillor Cassidy. That's the most crucial area. Those are the most vulnerable road users, are the kids who are walking or riding their bikes to and from school in the morning and afternoon. So this is one piece of it, and I appreciate the work staff are doing and are continuing to do. I appreciate the work that they've done just in terms of reaching out to me individually with a concern that I asked them to respond to. And I also appreciate Councillor Helmer's comments about the LTC has not been operating in a regular reality for closing in on 2 years now. And it's impacted them in ways that simply nobody could have imagined 2 years ago. So I do appreciate the difficulties that the Commission has to deal with as well. So just wanted to share that I'm pretty happy, and residents are pretty happy with where these are rolling out. And the sooner we can get it all done, the better.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands, I'll make a brief comment on item 2.4. This is just a contribution agreement as council directed city staff, and they applied for the Natural Resource Canada's Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which will help support electric vehicle charging infrastructure for the city's fleets. And the city was one of the successful applications and will be receiving $100,000 in funding, which is wonderful. Still seeing no further hands from committee, seeing as it's been moved and seconded, I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We have no scheduled items. Under items for direction, we do have one item being 4.1, which is a delegation request regarding 100 Stanley Street. In your added package, there is a presentation they provided in advance, and a member of that organization is in committee room and is here with us today to present. So I would need, if we want to receive that presenter, I would need a motion from committee and a vote to do so. Councillor Turner is moving that. Councillor Cassidy is seconding that. Any discussion on receiving the delegation request, recognizing Councillor Turner?
I recognize that staff will be coming forward with a report shortly on this. And since the delegates are here, I think it's appropriate to hear the delegation. That can also provide some context, so staff have an ability to provide more information when they present to us in the coming meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Van Merbergen is, I'll recognize you.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I'll start with asking Ms. Scher if there's any reason why we should be questioning the information that was given to us previously when we voted on this matter. And as we know, it is a decided matter of council. So perhaps Ms. Scher could speak to the information provided to us with regard to the cost provided and so on.
I would question process of discussing what the delegates are here to present before they've had an opportunity to present it. I'll just.
Well, Chair, if I could, we were provided in writing what their thoughts are. So we've already received the information. They presented it to us, and I assume the staff have looked at this. So I'm simply asking at this point, is there any reason that we should be questioning the information already provided to us by staff?
Sorry, the clerks are just checking on something. One moment, please.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I think that the question is in order. I'm not sure what staff may have to add, but the question is related to the previously provided information. I do understand that there is a subsequent report coming from staff at a later date. Perhaps it's scheduled for the next meeting, if I'm not mistaken, but Ms. Scher may be able to provide some information about when that next report is anticipated.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scher.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We are intending to report back on the direction provided to staff back in March, which was for us to pursue the pathway forward, it was to take the necessary actions to submit an amendment to the environmental assessment for Warncliffe Road to permit the demolition of the residence at 100 Stanley Street. Those conversations with the province have occurred, and they have advised us that there is not a need to amend the environmental assessment if we wish to pursue demolition. With respect to Councillor Van Meerbergen's question related to our estimate provided earlier this year, we do not have reason to believe that the information we have submitted to council in our previous report has changed.
Thank you. Councillor Van Merbringen, a follow-up?
Okay, thank you for that. So, we're in a position where we've been provided their information in writing to us and display cards and so on. It's a decided matter of council. I don't see any reason why we should be opening this up with a delegation at this time.
Okay. Thank you. I see no other questions or comments from committee. The vote is ready to be opened.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-1.
Okay, thank you. We will receive the delegation. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Keating. You have 5 minutes and you will be timed. And in our added package, we do have a copy of the slides you presented with us. So we do have that information ahead of us. So welcome and please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thanks. I have rehearsed, so I'm going to be at 5 minutes, maybe a second or two quickly. If you start on my title page, I'm Kelly McKeating, and I'm speaking on behalf of ACO London. Our presentation isn't about heritage. It's about transparency and council having the information it needs to make the best decision on behalf of all Londoners. When council voted in 2018 to relocate the house at 100 Stanley Street, it was estimated that the additional marginal cost to do so when compared to demolition was about $1 million. Sorry, $500,000. We were skeptical. We thought that the moving costs had been overestimated. However, we didn't voice our concerns because council decided to move the building. If you go to your second slide, when Londoners were told that the additional marginal cost had increased to a whopping $1 million, we were stunned and decided to do our own research. Here's what we've learned. When the relocation cost estimates were being developed, nobody from the city or its contractor talked to either of the two most experienced heritage building movers in Southern Ontario. These are companies that have moved dozens of barns and houses, including many brick structures. When we contacted those two companies, they each came back with quotes of about $400,000 to move the building, not 700, 400. To compare, we're told that the cost to move the fugitive slave chapel 2 kilometers from Thames Street to Soho was $27,000. Yes, 7 years ago. Yes, a one-story wood frame building and wood buildings are easier to move, but $27,000. Western Mechanical's experience with building relocation pertains to large concrete structures, not brick houses. We got a quote for a new foundation at the new location, $80,000. The amounts on this slide are the contractor's estimates obtained through an AMFIPA request. Based on our research, the January 2021 estimate is $1 million too high. If you could go to your next slide. Here's what we assert is a more realistic estimate. The total is $770,000. We've removed items that appear, based on the documents provided to us by the city, to be unrelated to the move. We've incorporated costs quoted by the two most experienced heritage movers in Southern Ontario. We've trimmed some of the consultant fees and contingency items because we can't fathom how one could spend an extra $550,000 on what is, at its core, a fairly simple task, something that's quite routine for someone with the right experience. Next slide. The city purchased 100 Stanley in September of 2020 for more or less the average cost of a single family home in London, St. Thomas. Although that average had increased to $610,000 by January 2021, the proceeds from an eventual sale were estimated at $450,000. The contractor's estimate excludes the upward trend in the real estate market, the value of the $200,000 in repairs and upgrades budgeted in their cost estimate, and the value of a new basement. We think $600,000 is more realistic. Next slide. If our research is accurate, the net cost to move the building is $170,000 and less than the estimated net cost to demolish. Even if our research is off by $100,000, which would surprise us, the net cost to move would be $500,000 than the net cost to demolish, which is exactly where we were at in 2018 when council decided to relocate and not demolish. Next slide. Our MFIPA request yielded little information about demolition costs. We don't know the source of the amounts in the contractor's analysis. We hope we've provided enough information to encourage you to take a second look at the financial viability of relocation over demolition. Setting the numbers aside, one item in the MFIPA package concerned us, and we want to bring it to your attention. This is from a November 3, 2020 email from the contractor to city staff shortly after the purchase of 100 Stanley was announced, and I'm quoting, "This presents an interesting situation as the relocation project was primarily premised on the former property owner moving with the residents and secondarily on the retention of the built heritage resource. This change in the present circumstances provides an opportunity to review the relocation option to see if it's a prudent approach for this property. 100 Stanley Street is an outstanding example of the Queen Anne style in both its interior and exterior design. It was designated under the Ontario Heritage Act in 2010, long before planning for this infrastructure project began. It did not lose its cultural value when it was sold." Next slide. Moving this house is the right thing to do from both a financial and a heritage perspective. Please do the right thing, and thanks for your time.
Thank you for your presentation and for being almost on the dot with your presentation today. Wonderful job. Okay, so that concludes the presentation. I will go to sorry, clerk looked at me, so I thought I was in trouble for something. I wasn't. So I'm starting a speakers list if anyone has comments. If not, we would need a motion to receive the presentation or other direction. I will start the speakers list with, or whatever Councillor Helmer has to say.
Thank you. I'm happy to move receipt of the materials provided by the delegation and also forward those to Civic Administration for consideration in the report they're working on to bring back to committee. I do appreciate the research that the delegates have done to try and come up with cost estimates. I think until we were to undertake a procurement process and get really specific bids from potential providers, we're really talking about cost estimates, and there could be a range of estimates that are reasonable. And so I think it's appropriate to forward them to Civic Administration for their consideration. I know we have directed the Civic Administration to come back with a report about, can we just demolish the building? I certainly did not support that when we dealt with it last time, but that was what council decided. And I think as we move through the process, having the best, most accurate estimates we can have will be helpful in deciding what we're going to do ultimately. So that's why I think forwarding it to Civic Administration is the right thing to do at this point. I really appreciate the work of the delegates to try and come up with the most accurate cost estimates we could, and also the work of staff to try and do the same. I think coming together, we can probably find the most accurate cost estimates and make the best decisions we can. Thank you.
Looking to committee, see if there's any other comments or a seconder. Councillor Cassidy, a question or seconding, or both?
Both.
Perfect. So we noted you as a seconder, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Thank you. And thanks to Councillor Helmer for this motion. I'm happy to second it. Thank you as well to the delegate for coming to speak with us today. I will note as well that that city staff didn't recommend demolition of this building, and the city report gave cost estimates for demolition and also gave cost estimates for the repercussions of demolition, because the EA that we had completed and all of the plans for the project included moving the house. So by changing direction midstream, city staff estimated that there would be significant cost increases in total for the whole project, and could possibly affect other major road transportation network projects in sort of a domino effect. So it was never the staff recommendation to demolish this building. It was the majority vote on council. I, like Councillor Helmer, did not support that motion to go ahead with demolition. I didn't feel, based on what city staff, even if there is an overestimate in the cost of moving the building, the staff report indicated that there likely wouldn't be any cost savings by demolishing the building because of the added costs that they identified through project delay and other things that could happen down the road. So it was never a question for me. I supported the staff recommendation, but unfortunately that's not what passed at council. So I'm happy that this information be passed to staff as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Recognizing Councillor Van Meerbergen, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. If we reopened every decided file from this council, every time an advocacy group shows up, we'd be reopening all our decided matters. This past fair and square in council, there were many very good reasons why demolition was the preferred choice. And now this advocacy group is trying to throw a Hail Mary pass. And, you know, we're sitting here thinking, well, you know, we're on the slippery slope to reopen. And I don't think that's obviously the correct action going forward. And so I would suggest that even this motion should be voted in the negative. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Chair, if I might, through you, Madam Chair, Ms. Chair had read what the motion was from council at the last pass. Could that be reread? I was just trying to pull it up quickly, but I wasn't fast enough.
Certainly. Ms. Chair, are you able to read that again for committee?
I certainly can read the part that's included in the report we're working on. I don't necessarily have all of it, but the key direction was to take necessary action to submit an amendment to the environmental assessment for the Warncliffe Road South Improvements Project to permit the demolition of the residence at 100 Stanley and any other necessary administrative steps to advance the project in as timely a manner as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I really appreciate that. So through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Van Meerbergen, so the direction of council is not to demolish. The direction of council is to take the necessary steps to make sure that the environmental assessment process would allow for it. So as we go along this process, ultimately the decision of council still remains to be made on what ends up happening with the building. I think it's important that any information that might be germane to that discussion comes forward. And I completely recognize that council may wish in its wisdom to proceed with the demolition, but we haven't made that step yet. We haven't made that decision yet. This discussion is completely in order. And I think it provides staff an opportunity to incorporate some of what was brought forward today into their response when they bring something forward at our next meeting.
Councillor Turner, could you take the chair for a moment before I can make a comment?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, the chair is mine and the speakers are you.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Just a brief comment, as certainly I was on the other side of this debate when it came through council, but understood the desire for council for cost savings and to expedite this, as certainly this road entranceway is a major thoroughfare for both Councillor Turner and I's ward, and it's a pinch point for pedestrians, cyclists, and road users. But when council made that decision, we were aware that there could be some cost inflations related to the delay of the project. And ideally, the timelines in the beginning, when they were laid out before us, was for that site to be cleared in fall of 2021, which is where we're at now. I think it is appropriate to have all the information come back, not saying council will change its decision, just it would be one better informed that if there was a way forward to do something with the home that wouldn't be any more costly and would not hold up timelines that staff will bring back. So I am fine forwarding this report and for consideration to Civic Administration, recognizing Ms. Scher said November 2nd, that report is going to come back. Them considering this information will not hold up that report. I know it's a staff discussion that there's legal considerations behind the scenes, that there's the heritage features. Some things can be wrapped into the agreement with the prior owner that may or may not allow us to do things. I'm not a realty or legal expert, so I will leave that to staff, and I'm happy to see that report come back on November 2nd with whatever update it might have for us, as staff is still making their way. So I do think this is timely. And once again, it may or may not change what we're doing, but I believe it will give for a better informed decision of council as we move forward. Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Madam Chair, the chair is yours.
Thank you. I see no further speakers. I'll do a last moment's call. Okay, seeing none, the clerk is ready to open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-1.
That concludes our items for direction. Under deferred matters and additional business, the deferred matters list has been cleaned up. Looking to see if committee has any questions or comments. If not, I would need a mover and a seconder to receive that list. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Merbergen. Okay, opening the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
That moves us on to adjournment. Looking for a motion. Motion to adjourn made by Councillor Van Merbergen and seconded by Councillor Helmer. A hand vote is adequate. All in favor of adjournment?
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, everyone. Happy birthday again to Councillor Turner, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Madam Chair.